Hello, everyone. My name is Zeph, and welcome to the Star Network podcast. Today, we have with us a special guest, Tobi Akinkunmi, who's the co-founder and CEO of Lickquor. Hi, Tobi. It's great to have you on the show.
Hello, Zeph. Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's begin. When I think about your brand, Lickquor, which is a tech-enabled platform, right, that distributes beverages, and you can shed more light on that coverage, right? I think it would be quite good to sort of understand what problem is Lickquor trying to solve, and what was your mental process in getting here?
Lickquor it started initially as an on-demand alcohol delivery platform, and now I would say it is an alcohol distribution platform because the e-commerce platform is just one of the arms of our business. But I'll say Lickquor was born out of three things. The first thing being convenience, second thing being reliability, third thing being authenticity. From a convenience standpoint, at that point in time, the idea started in 2019, 2020. So I spent a lot of COVID really building out and fleshing out the idea. And at that point in time, in terms of reliability, in terms of convenience, we didn't have, it was about that time that people like Glovo, etc. were just starting to come into the market. So just the idea of getting what you want when you need it, especially in the alcohol space, wasn't really a thing. Because now Lickquor, you get your drink in 30 minutes, right? At that point in time, people are doing same day delivery, maybe next day delivery. So that was it from the convenience standpoint. From reliability, it's also one thing for me to say, I'm going to send you, you're going to get in 30 minutes, and for you to actually get it in 30 minutes, right? Now from authenticity, in 2019, I think there was a cancer agency that said about 5% of cancer cases in Nigeria are caused by fake alcohol, right? So we already see what the problem is there. And those were the three problems that led us to where we are today. Now, in terms of how we then, conceptualized everything, it was just a matter of working backwards, right? We knew what the problem was. So it was like, how do we build a business model, that is based on efficiency, service delivery, putting the customer at the center and just quality. That's what we solved for in terms of, looking through, the supply chain, our customer service, how we source our drinks, how we built the brand. I'll say those were the things that led us here.
Amazing. I think that's very interesting to hear because I think most brands, or like if you're in like the food and beverage space, it's very easy to think of it as one-sided. I have these products and I just want to like get them out there and make sales. I particularly like how you've thought about it holistically. So from the point of view of one, just, the ability to get quality and authentic drinks, and we'll get to that in a second. I like that you actually put out that statistic. I didn't know that, and we know that this is such a huge thing right now that's a bit prevalent like in our country today, in our market and other African countries as well, in terms of fake and unregulated drinks. But it's so interesting to hear that this idea was birthed through COVID. I think many people would always say, yes, I thought about this, during COVID because we had so much time on our hands, right? But the trust factor of having a brand that says you will get this in 30 minutes and at 30 minutes it happens. I can actually testify. I've experienced it exactly when I ordered drinks and you said, you'll get it quite quickly. And I just assumed, okay, 2 days. And I think that's also the Nigerian mentality, right? Exactly. When they tell you get it quickly, we almost hedge for the risk of, T+2 is when I'm going to get it. And I was quite surprised when the delivery came fairly quickly. I will touch more on that process of how you're able to map it out. But I think for the audience who's listening, who wants to start a very similar business, whether it's in food or beverages and so on, how should they position, right? Because I think when you look at Lagos, it's such a cultural capital. There are weddings all the time, there are events, there are celebrations, and I love it. I wouldn't change it. I think that's one of my favorite things about being African. But the point being, how does someone position to get into that space? Because it is quite competitive. What advice would you then give to them?
I think firstly, it's essential that, you know what makes you different, right? I'm a strong believer of nothing is new under the sun, right? So while there might be similarities between your product and the next person's product, there must be a differentiating factor, right? I remember when we started Lickquor in 2022, a lot of people were like, there are a lot of platforms coming up at the same time. And I didn't really fret because I knew what we were offering. And it was a matter of, first of all, authenticity, customer-centric platform. and just generally efficiency, right? And over time, that has allowed us to differentiate ourselves in the market. The people that actually use us, they know why they come to us. Price is not necessarily a factor because it's an open market, so most people's prices are competitive. So it's really about what else makes you stand out, right? So that's the first thing I'll say. Find what you can say, okay, we do this the best, and that is always something you can back. Now, the second thing I'll say is actually having a good service and product, right? You can't take that for granted. Your branding might be good, this might be good, but if your actual product is not something you can stand by, over time it's going to show. You know, even apart from even speaking about liquor, you have restaurants like RSVP, Talindo's. They've been here for ages. Talindo's has been around since I was in primary school.
Yeah.
And I still went there two months ago,
Exactly.
still had good food.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because the product is good. So at the end of the day, if you're not able to build a good product, you know, over time, it's going to show. So I'll say once you're able to do those two things, and the first part, you know, for you to determine what that USP is and build on it, you obviously have to do market research. Before we even built Lickquor as a platform, I looked, okay, what else is really in the market? What are these people doing wrongly? Those are things I'm going to do differently. And that was also a good starting point.
Then I think, like you said, it does sort of boil down to like household name. And sometimes with building brands, particularly with startups, there's this form of like instant gratification. I want to be visible. I want everybody to buy my brand. And then people forget the bigger picture of, but this is really about legacy building. And I think this is even just more of like a cultural mindset in terms of how we think about business as Nigerians. And something that I would like to see is not just strong tier 1 institutions like, oh, I need to be in finance, or I need to like be in healthcare for there to be like longevity, but can businesses like yourself, Lickquor, be here by the time we have grandchildren? And it has morphed into something else where it goes beyond just beverages, but you know, it is a very efficient platform. It can even one day become what we saw as Jumia or, you know, Amazon, right? I don't know whether that's like in the pipeline, if you've thought about that, but
I won't say much.
No, don't say much. Don't reveal the future. But, you know, the way that you've pretty much addressed what you are trying to solve, the convenience one, the reliability, and the trust. And I think with any e-commerce platform, once you can solve those three metrics, you're good for life, right? Like Amazon will always be Amazon because of that reliability, convenience, and trust. And I think the liquor aspect is to me, what I see looking at your business is just one segment. And I'm quite curious to see what you guys do in the future, right? But I like that you also touched about like Talindo's, because correct, Talindo's for me is one of like my typical go-to. I don't even think twice. If I feel, even with that delivery, if I feel, okay, I don't want to go in, but I can order, they will deliver in good time. If we go in to sit down there, what's that steak with the flames? It's still the same thing, right? So that trust and brand loyalty, there has to be consistency. So I like that you said that. But let's go to unregulated drinks, because the statistic you gave, interesting. Like I said, I didn't know that, but it's such a huge thing. You know, they're fake drinks. Things are not regulated the way that they should be. There was actually this article that came out in October last year, and it was saying how the UK government issued like a warning to citizens saying, you know, certain countries have been put on the list for fake drinks. December, there is so much that's flowing. How can this be controlled? Or maybe you can share with us a situation where you identified where, you know, drinks that came into your warehouse or your supply chain was fake. How are you able to manage that? Or like, how can you even test that out? Because I'm guessing the bulk order just comes in. Are you going to start opening every bottle? Like, how does that actually work?
I would say we've been able to develop a system now because we've been doing trial and error in the initial stages, right? So now we know what works, and, you know, there are no issues with it. But I'll say the first thing for us was obviously developing a supplier list, and we don't deviate from it now. These are the people we buy the drinks from. We have, you know, what SKUs or products we buy from these different people, and we stick to that. Even if somebody outside that list should give me a better price, I'm not going for it. I'm sticking to what I know, right? And this really helps because the people that we're working with are people that are getting the products directly from the importers. So it's as direct as fresh off the boat. And we've also built this relationship with them over time. That's one. Number two, we do physical inspections. The staff have been trained, you know, to inspect these bottles when they arrive. As you said, it's a cumbersome process. It's not easy, but it's what we have to do. And through that, in the past, we have found fake drinks, right? I know there was was it last year or 2 years ago? I think there was like a case of 1942 tequila. And how did we know it was fake? Through the label, right? Because the reality is, the way they make these fakes is, for instance, a club sells 100 bottles of 1942 tomorrow. They don't dispose of their bottles properly, right? So these people are taking it, they get to reprint the label if the label is already worn out, and they'll seal it and put it back into circulation. So if you're able to inspect properly, or you pay enough attention to detail, you can see, okay, this label is a bit, we know what 42 should look like, this looks a bit funny, but you must pay attention to detail, right? Because that is prior to you tasting it. When you taste it, I've also had another issue. What happened in that instance was, it was for one of my birthday parties, and we decided to try a new person, right? And that was the first time. Luckily, it was for my birthday party, and I happened to be the first person to go to the bar to have a shot. I had a shot. I was like, nah, this doesn't taste. So that was
something is wrong.
So luckily, it happened to me.
You, yeah.
I was like, nah, this can't be right. Like, it was tequila, but it tasted like orange. I was like, tequila terrible. Blanc, nah, yeah. And that was it, right? And in both instances, we've stopped working with those people, because that's how you then can control the quality. Otherwise, and a lot of people selling the fakes sometimes don't know they're fakes, right? Because as you said, something like Dirty December, the turnover is quite high. There's no time to really sit down. Oh, is this fake? Is this not? And that's just, the industry we're in, unfortunately. So I would say putting, processes in place internally, and just being sure of who you're working with. Those are the only two ways you can really fix for that.
Great. And I like the very hands-on approach. Just the ability to also like train your team to say, look, you have to be very thorough with things. And I think most times with startup businesses, it is very difficult to get team buy-in to attention to detail. So what I tend to find is there's a task and they just feel, okay, the drinks are here, let's just sell it. But how do you even then sort of enforce in terms of that mindset and behaviors that this is very critical to even just the success of the business, or this is critical to you even one day being just an admin person to being like an operations manager? It's that attention to detail. And I'm glad that your brand is taking that on as part of its like philosophy and principle. It's funny on the story of how like you tried the drink. If that was me, it would have been a problem, because I would have arrived late and my guests would have exactly would have finished it to be like, something is off here. But well done on that. Let's talk about convenience, right, and logistics. Because I think that, logistics is very, very key with a lot of startup businesses. I wouldn't name the company, but there was a company, I think, last month or so that was going around on social media, and people were saying they are completely disappointed that what they ordered was from like a different brand. And it was so huge, right? That they placed an order. So let's say it's your brand, but then what they got was completely different. And the brand that was actually featured, the founder had no idea that they were even on that platform. Now, logistics is so scary sometimes because you trust either a third party to take your product, you believe that that third party is going to deliver the product in which the consumer has paid for. How have you been able to solve for sort of, the word is not misalignment, but how have you been able to ensure that you work with credible logistic partners so that there is no misrepresentation of your products whereby they can swap drinks? And again, it's not really anything you can control, right? But how is this pushing startups to think in terms of protection of the value in which they are given? Does that make sense?
No, perfect. I think with us, a big part of what we do is, relationship building, right? So we have some internal drivers, but we've also set up, a driver community, because sometimes if our own drivers are too busy, we have to outsource it, right? But because these are people that are either referred or, we've worked with them on some other occasion, we know their capabilities and they're trustworthy. To be fair, we've never had, the business is 4 years this year. We've actually, and I'll put it down to God because there's always the human element with everything. We've never had an issue of theft, where, this is a driver was sent to deliver something, they delivered something else. We've never had that once. Obviously, you have issues with breakages because, But another thing we do is we seal our bags, right? Because we seal our bags, if you get your order and it's not sealed, you know it's been tampered just right off the bat. Because we seal it in such a way that for you to open the nylon bag, you have to like completely destroy the bag. Yeah. So there's no other way about it. So I think that might also deter some of the guys from doing it. But yeah, I think finding the right people to work with is really the backbone of most businesses, right? As you said earlier about like, teaching staff certain things. If your staff are not aware about, okay, these are the principles you're based on, this is, what the business is meant to do, they would act any sort of way, right? That's why even sometimes I share customer feedback with the staff, So if somebody says, your staff were really good, I'm like, you see, like at the end of the day, it's not me that they're saying Tobi's really good. It's you that is getting the compliment, So you're actually doing this at the end of the day for yourself because you're the one that's going to get the praise. So I'll say being able to, locate those right people and train them properly is as much as you can do. Yeah. And then human elements, you just have to pray for that, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I feel like I'm waiting for someone to have like a training center, right? Sometimes I think of it, I'm like, maybe I should do this because it's such a need. Like every business needs this. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, but just that human element of like training people. I really feel that it's not so much an intelligence problem. I think it's more of like a mindset problem of what it is to work or what the value of work actually means. And of course, I feel like it's also tied to like bigger, wider problems. And the way that I tend to look at it is there's the empathy of, okay, this person is not being as detailed or meticulous, or the capacity they have to be detailed is limited because of personal issues. And this then boils down to like a state problem. So whether maybe, for instance, the staff working for me hasn't had light for maybe 2 days, that affects their efficiency and productivity, or maybe they were stuck in traffic for over 6 hours. So that's exactly. And I just kind of feel like people who then own businesses as founders, how are we then incorporating these sort of like variables that, okay, so this is why the attention to detail might be limited. This is why they're not as efficient. For your business, whereby it's like, kind of like on demand, it could even be, I don't know what your culture is, but I like that you are sort of, what I'm hearing from you is like empowerment, showing them, oh, they said the customer service was good. That alone is enough to incentivize anyone. If they sit in traffic for 6 hours, they begin to feel the value of that work. And I'm hoping that a lot of young people like us who are owning businesses and changing the culture of work is completely different to like previous generations where there was so much like fear and so much like hierarchy, but just like, oh, this is why we're doing this. So I like that. But Tobi, let's hear your biggest challenge, like setting up Lickquor.
So I'll break that into 2 different questions. So the biggest challenges, I'll say, are firstly funding, right? I think, and we kind of touched on it before we started the podcast, alcohol is still seen as it's like alcohol, tobacco, gambling.
Almost frowned upon.
They're all in that same bracket, right? So we've been fortunate enough to find people who still believe in what we're trying to build, because at the end of the day, it's a business, there are numbers, there's an audience, that's what matters. But I'm sure it's been harder to find those people than it will be for a health tech or a fintech or an agrotech, right? Which is where most people want to divert their funds to, or real estate, right? So I'll say funding has been, one of the big challenges. And the second big challenge would be people actually believing we do what we say we do. Like what you said, when you ordered, you were surprised. Exactly. A lot of people that have known about the business, let's say since we started, would, let's say, order tomorrow. And they're like, oh, do you actually deliver in the same day? I'm like, man, I've been pushing this thing on social media. Saying we deliver it in 30 minutes. Yeah. Not even same day, 30 minutes, right? So people still have that fear of like, do they really do what they say they do? And the only way for them to know we really do is by giving us a try, right? I'll say those are the 2 biggest challenges. In terms of, an incident that happened, I remember the first year we started, there was a cousin had told me from the jump when we started that always fire staff immediately.
I've heard that advice
like
too.
Don't have that
be
sympathy.
Emotional.
Just like get rid of them. So coming into liquor, I took that in mind. Like, I'll just fire staff immediately. But when it came down to it, there's so many factors. The convenience of before you hire another person, train them. So this guy was a dispatch driver, and at that point in time, he should have been fired. But we just got into that loop of let's leave and give him one more try. And lo and behold, I think it was December 16. This is like our first December ever. And this guy just gets into almost a fatal accident, just wrecks the bike, right? Now, at that point in time, there was not enough time to buy a new bike. Keep in mind, we had operated for a couple months, and it's also peak period. So we're dealing with the fact that we had just lost an asset, basically, because it could never have been fixed to the point where it was able to work again. And then this guy's in the hospital. And the third factor is the fact we now had to spend more money on deliveries because we had to use Uber dispatch throughout the whole Christmas. So imagine how much that eats into your margin. And the way we could have solved that problem was just getting rid of the guy. I think that was one time when it happened, I was just like, yeah. That was it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I feel like one that must have been very frustrating, like very early on. And like just the cost difference from a bike versus then getting like an actual physical car. But correct, your cousin is right on that advice, because I've also heard that very similarly, that we shouldn't ideally be emotional when it comes to like our businesses. Like you just have to be as very technical about it. Well, this doesn't work, remove it from the equation. But of course, the human elements of you work with the person, you know that name, you talk to them, you do feel quite sentimental. And I think it's just a thing of like developing that thick skin. The way that I like to tell myself is, Zeph, if you get comfortable doing very hard things, so hard being the example of letting someone go who is not contributing efficiently, this sort of stretches your capacity to make bigger decisions. And so let's say, Lickquor in 3 years is like the biggest e-commerce platform for beverages and food, right? I'm just giving an example. And you need to make a very quick decision to adopt technology A and let go of 5 people who would take 10 hours to implement, but this technology will take like 5 minutes. You're going to be sentimental, but in the long run, what is it going to help you with? It's going to help you scale. And I think the more that we just get used to doing those hard decisions, we're better for it. And it's typically like a sign that this was never meant to be the direction. And now that's the consequence. Money gone. You learn the hard way, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, the story is interesting. I'm very curious to see like where else it's going to go, and well done. Let's dive in more into like your background, right? Because when I did see in your profile that you did some marketing and comms, and that has always kind of like been your narrative. You work with like the NBA, which is also quite interesting. Pre the session, we were talking about what you also do in sports, right? Tell us more about that. And would you sort of say those experiences have shaped you to then start an e-commerce business? Because most times what I find is people want to transition within their careers or start something. And there's this idea that I needed that academic background first before going into it. But how have those experiences helped you to get to where you are today?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think firstly, in terms of liquor, I don't think either of those helped me start the business. What helped me start the business was back then, 2016, me and a friend had a creative agency called FTC. We used to do events. Copacabana, Boozy Brunch. And we worked very closely with alcohol brands, right? So first I was able to build those relationships then, and also able to see the margins from a business standpoint to know, okay, this could be something, if well explored, there's value here, right? Which this are manifested in liquor. But in terms of like NBA, Universal Music, etc., they taught me how to build brands. I think those are 2 global brands, right? Anywhere the NBA, if you talk basketball, NBA is synonymous with basketball, right? Universal Music, your biggest artist in the world assigned to Universal Music. So for me, with liquor, we are not just trying to sell alcohol, right? I always tell when I'm doing my investor pitches, I'm like, anybody can sell alcohol, but only liquor sells alcohol the way we do it, right? Because it's not, what we're actually selling is, we're not selling the product on the website or the product we supply. We're selling our service, the way we supply those products and everything else, right? That is what makes us unique. anybody can open an e-commerce website and put the same drinks we have. That's not the unique part of it. It's just the way we sell it that makes us unique, right? So I'll say working at other places taught me how to build a brand, and coming into a space where margins are relatively limited because you're in a competitive market, which has like no barriers to entry. It's necessary for you to try and differentiate yourself by building a brand, right? My margins will always be the same, but there's no cap on how much I can charge from the brand I've built, right? And that is the way we've looked at Lickquor. It's more of, we're building a brand that people can, you can wear a t-shirt, you're proud that has Lickquor on it, you attend an event we do, and you're just part of the community. And that also really influences the way we market and engage with customers. We're very like community content driven, engaging content, because we're not trying to just sell alcohol at you. We're trying to make it a whole thing that you engage with and you find interesting. Those are how those experiences helped me to get to where I am. And as you rightly mentioned, there's also the sports angle, which, coming from the NBA, it just felt natural to also, leverage that interest and build it into something. And so far, so good.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, amazing. Well done. I now see like the full connect.
Full scope.
Exactly, the full scope. And it does kind of make sense. Like, it kind of feels like you just pretty much just followed your strengths and your passions, essentially, like from the events business into then doing this for yourself. The NBA, I always found particularly interesting. I don't know how basketball is doing like on the continent, right? I know that there's something they tend to do is it in Kigali? Where people go, what is that called again?
The Basketball Africa League.
Okay, how is that doing?
It's doing, I think they're about to start the 5th or 6th season. So far, so good. I think it's the only league the NBA owns outside America.
Outside America, yeah.
So it's doing quite good. I think it's in terms of the way they've built the league, it's now a way that basketball players don't just need to aspire to play in America. You can play in your local league in Nigeria and still have the ability to play at that level at the BAL, which is good. So yeah, it's doing really good.
Amazing. Great. And I like what you said about community, right? What I'm finding is that, and I think a lot of brands are picking this up right now, like community is very critical. Like you can have product, but many people can be selling that same product. Why should you be any different? A friend was telling me that she goes to a particular gym and she loves this so much. And I said, why? She said, Zeph, it's really about how the place makes me feel. And at the time I thought, that's interesting. They make you feel how. I had been to that gym once, but I felt like the classes were too excessive for me. So I decided to give it another try. They had a different class and I went for the class. And I promise you, Tobi, when I left, I actually wanted to call her to say, I understand how they made you feel. And it was just sort of the environment to which the class was held. It wasn't just your typical, here are the dance moves, from the way the instructor coordinated to the music that was playing in the background to even after the session of the class when they said, okay, guys, it's time to breathe. And the affirmations they were saying in the breathing process from, well done, you. I almost started crying. Honestly, I literally almost started crying. I was like, what is this? And since then, I've been saying I do want to go back. And that for me was such a learning point in terms of what you sell to your customer. So I like how you are thinking holistically and you are positioning your team to say it's not just about the product on Lickquor, it's about how you deliver that service. And in terms of funding, I feel like there's so much going on right now about like creativity funds being created, particularly in Nigeria. I stick to say Nigeria is the cultural capital for Africa, our fashion, our food, our entertainment, our drinks. So in terms of funding, I'm not too worried about you. I think that will come. Like it naturally goes hand in hand. You have events, you need food and drinks, right? So that's only a matter of time. But definitely also look at places like, I know BOI is quite they're quite open to such like niches in terms of your brand. But we're about to round up. I have 2 questions for you. The last question I'm particularly excited about, which you spoke about. But before that, is there something you want people to know about Lickquor, like the future of Lickquor, what they should be excited on?
I think, in a couple of years, I want us to be, an alcohol distribution, beverage distribution chain across Africa, right? Launching your favorite, brands in the continent, right? We recently moved into distribution end of last year. Our first partner is this exciting brand, the world's first plantain infused rum. It's called Dodo. So, those are the sort of brands we aim to work with. It's different. We align in terms of values, and we can see the angle with it. So expect more things like that from us. Right now, we're just in Lagos, and we're actually just on the island, right? We've focused in terms of the on-demand service. We just service the island. So we're looking to, expand to the mainland, looking to, expand to different states. And yeah, those are some exciting things we should look forward to soon.
And my last question, typically I end the sessions, and last year my question was always, what's your favorite quiz and why? 2026, we're switching it up. The question that I have for you is, if you could change one thing about the way that we live in the world today, what would it be and why?
That's a very, very, a very, very deep question.
Good.
From my perspective, I would say the fear of failure, right? I think we're all in one way or the other, we all have that fear, right? It's also really tied to the fear of taking risks, right? And I think in a world where we could change that, people would be more authentic, people would take more chances, and people might be happier, right? From my experience, me even transitioning my actual background. Now we've spoken about MBA, Universal Music, Lickquor, sports. I'm a lawyer.
No way. That wasn't even in your bio. I'm so surprised.
I'm a lawyer who transitioned out of law. So back to the point you made about people scared about doing things without having professional qualifications in a certain space. I'm a lawyer who transitioned out of law with no necessary qualifications into marketing, right? My only qualifications at that point in time was the creative agency I spoke about, because we had worked with brands, we got numbers, so you could say, okay, I understand this thing, which was really based off a passion. So I think throughout my life, I have taken calculated risks, by God's grace, I hope, and I'm reaping the benefits of it. We're not where we want to be, but we're not where we started from. If we could fix that fear of failure, fear of taking risks, people would be happier, do more stuff and just, enjoy life more.
And I agree with you. I think it's a thing that we have to constantly tell ourselves, honestly, the fear is so limiting. In fact, it's crippling, to be very honest. And I want to highlight the word you said. You said happier. I truly align with you that people would be so much happier because there's less complexity and overthought to wanting to do something that you're passionate about, or even just saying something, right? It's like now today the world is just so over-censored. Your behaviors are so overthought. And for why, right? The greatest people, they just do it and they thrive.
It's funny you say that, because I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they brought up social media being a big issue, right? Because people are worried about what others will think of them. If you post something, it even affects the way people post on social media. Back then, people would just post a picture of their pizza or something random on their story. But now everybody wants to curate it, etc., right? So it all goes down to these things. I always tell, so for instance, if my wife should ask me, what should I wear? I'll be like, this looks nice or this looks nice. Well, wear whatever you're most comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, that is what matters. If you're wearing that outfit, but you're not comfortable with it, you might look nice, but you're not going to enjoy your time. Yeah. So this looks nice, so I really like it, but wear what you're most comfortable with. That's why I always end my advice with,
I agree. Amazing. Tobi, it's actually been so great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed
It's been fantastic. And I'm sure people in your audience who probably go on Lickquor, but they haven't heard much about you, I'm sure they'll be quite interested to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm glad I could finally share. This is actually the first time I've done this.
Yeah,
so I'm glad I could share with you.
Good.
Yeah.
Well done. So guys, you've heard it from Tobi, the journey building Lickquor. If you want to hear more about his business, you're interested to get beverages on the platform, you can reach out to them on their social media handles. Tobi, what's your handle?
So our business handle is lickquor.ng, lickquor.ng, and our website is www.lickquor.ng.
Amazing. So that's it for now, guys. Until next time, don't forget to follow us on our social media handles at The Star Network Pod and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Bye.